speak to us and equip us about the current pandemic, also about the virus, which even the report states that this is not the end of the pandemic, which you are going to see. Is going to see furthermore with the change of lifestyle, the destruction of environment, and much more. So with this, I will now hand over to Dr. Megha Singhal for 10 to 15 minutes presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Vamini. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the association for giving the opportunity to speak. I really like Dr. Ashwini Goda's talk because I kind of relate to that talk about the mental health issues that we are facing because of the coronavirus. I think I totally relate to her talk, and each and everything when I come up to my talk, I would like to talk to her. If possible, for her to put down each and every point regarding how coronavirus pandemic has affected the mental health of everyone. Okay, coming back to my topic, today I'm going to talk about COVID-19 and public health from a health science researcher perspective. To start with an introduction, I'm sure everyone knows what a virus is. It's an infective agent which typically consists of a nucleic acid molecule which has a protein coat, and it's submicroscopic and it is able to multiply only within the living cells of the host. So what is a coronavirus? Coronavirus is one of the many viruses that cause diseases in mammals and in birds. In humans, coronavirus is able to cause respiratory tract infections, which are typically mild. They cause symptoms like common cold and rare forms, which are like SARS, MERS, and now that we are looking at COVID-19, which is even lethal in immune-compromised patients and patients with underlying conditions and people with old age mostly. So a novel coronavirus, this is a new strain which was not previously identified in humans, and we know that we know now very well that Wuhan city in China had this outbreak in December of 2019, and the common signs of infections include the respiratory symptoms, fever, cough, shortness of breath, and breathing difficulties. In more severe cases, this infection also causes pneumonia, severe acute respiratory syndrome, kidney failure, and even death. Now, at the end of 2019, this coronavirus was found responsible for a cluster of atypical cases of pneumonia in Wuhan. And we all know that since then, the story has been said by the media and everyone that it's been spreading so fast and the whole world is affected by it, and the WHO has labeled it as a pandemic. So talking about a brief history of this pandemic caused by viruses, the viruses that have been coming from China time and again starting. Lately, we know that H5N1 and H1N1 that also came through. So COVID-19 pandemic is most often actually compared with the H1N1 influenza pandemic of the 1980 or the Spanish flu. However, there have been other pandemics also. So how does this coronavirus pandemic compare to those? So most of the pandemics of the 20th and the 21st century have either been caused by an influenza virus or a coronavirus. The 2003 SARS coronavirus pandemic had a much smaller impact than this current pandemic and killed fewer than 1,000 people. In terms of the number of deaths that COVID has caused, we know that the number is increasing every day in lakhs and lakhs. It's actually a lot more as compared to the previous flu pandemics. And we've also noticed that every time this kind of virus infection spreads, it's even worse and worse, and I'm not sure if you're prepared for that. The Asian flu that came about in 1957 to 58 killed an estimate of about 1.1 million people, close to, and even in the Hong Kong flu pandemic, close to 1 million people were thought to be killed, which was between 1968 and 70. Now, in contrast, the H1N1 flu, which came about, I think, around 2012, which was also called the swine flu. I myself contracted the disease. I remember working on swine flu at that time. That was relatively mild. The symptoms weren't that great, and most of the people got cured by themselves, and hospitalization wasn't even needed at that time. However, in case of COVID-19, the Asian flu, which is similar to the Asian flu, it killed people mostly older than 65 years, basically. The immunity is compromised, or people, like I said, with underlying conditions. So this was kind of similar to the Asian flu. The Spanish flu was a little different because it hit the younger people and the healthy people particularly hard. And most of the people that died were between 20 and 40 years of age. And 99% were younger than 65 years, which is quite surprising. And similarly, 87% of the deaths in 2009, I think around 11 swine flu pandemic were those who were younger than 65 years. So the next question arises, why are we at a risk from local outbreaks turning into global pandemics? Now, there are many challenges that exist worldwide that increase the risk that outbreak will occur and spread rapidly, including the risk of infectious pathogens spilling over from animals to humans. That's the worst, actually, because considering China, I mean, I shouldn't say that, but a lot of non-vegetarian food is being eaten in China. Then development of antimicrobial resistance, it's not uncommon. It actually is related to other diseases as well. Spread of the infectious diseases through the global travel and trade, now that we know. And also the most important thing with countries like us, the developing countries, is the weak public health infrastructures. So how the medical and the health science research is reorientated after every outbreak, and what are the challenges that the scientists and the doctors have faced. The health science and the medical professionals have underlined that these infectious disease outbreaks are threats to global health security and disrupt the societal well-being. I mean, man is a social animal. Social interactions are very, very important, and to disrupt that, it completely the physical and the mental movement is kind of blocked, and hence I think these things play a role in frontline warriors. One, that is, scientists play a role inside the lab, important role where they help finding the vaccines, and another kind of people who are doctors, they play important role inside the hospitals. In this context, there are a number of labs, meaning they're working round the clock to get the vaccines, to get testing done for the people. There are quick test kits to boost the immune system. People are coming up with different types of methodologies, the old age solutions, the Ayurveda, everyone's coming up with solutions to boost the immune system to help prevent or to subside the infection. So for COVID-19, what was done and what the world could do. The first need is the development of a well-structured healthcare system, which actually can accommodate most of the people, covering the critical aspects of the universal health coverage. After that, how the multilateral agencies, policymakers, societies, and the individuals, how they coordinate. The most important thing is how everyone needs to coordinate how particular things should come out, like how a management should come out effective. So in these time of crisis, this situation, this kind of management is really vital. What I personally feel is the primary flaw in COVID-19 response has been the slowness in the knowledge in sharing by China for whatever reasons. The actual condition was shared with the world by China. I think that was quite late when the infection had already started spreading to multiple countries, and hence the health science approach was delayed. And the critical pillar in tackling the pandemic also is the innovation and the advancement in medical research, which is currently lacking. Such advancements have needed monetary support. We know that fundings are always tight, and every time, whenever a budget is created, most of the time the research funding is cut off, and we very well know how researchers are very low paid. So those kind of things, I think people really need to pay attention that, where to put the money. Health is the most important thing and priority. So those kind of things need to be paid attention of now. They have really been ignored until in 2005, Bill Gates really warned that due to inadequate investment in epidemic prevention, highly contagious infection impact like a biological war would come up, which would actually kill millions of worldwide, which is actually coming true now. Because every time something comes up, the budget is usually cut from the research, considering that is not important, which I guess is a lesson to learn from the COVID-19 pandemic, which is severely affected the world. And there is a need for adequate investment in medical research, vaccine development, and epidemiological engineering mapping to strengthen the efficacy of the health system to contain the widespread diseases. We need to be prepared for an epidemic also, which requires a trilateral design. The scientists, based on the start, they need to be ready to create an epidemiological genomic and clinical data for the disease, which could actually help us to prevent such epidemics or pandemics in future. Also, international actors and states need to record a program of the disease containment, focusing on monitoring the state's capacity, how the situation can be tackled in the most efficient way. I guess that's the prime thing, that okay, if an infection is spread, the most efficient way to tackle the infection, that's another way of preventing the disease. Also, tracking the progress in vaccination and diagnosis is also essential to identify the barriers of production and equitable distribution. So the next thing coming to this, the disease, how the disease can be tackled. So I would like to give a brief idea about the clinical trials, how a clinical trial is carried out for a general audience. So what is a clinical trial? A clinical trial basically consists of 4 phases, where the drug is approved by the designated agency to be used by the general public. So during phase 1, the drug is given to a small number of healthy people and people with the disease to look at side effects and figure out how effective the disease is in treating, considering how big the side effects are. Is it really worth proceeding with more number of people? Looking also at the mortality rate. In the phase 2, the drug is given to several hundreds of people who have the disease, looking to see how the drug is working. Basically, it goes on from small number of people, checking the mortality rate and the improvement, and then going on to more number of people. In the phase 3, it goes to a large-scale trial where the drug is given to several hundreds or even thousands of people, like 3,000 people approximately. So compared to the control, which is also called placebo, which is given inactive compound, where in which the drug is made and it is given, the drug is given to that people who are infected, and then this trial can actually take from 1 to 4 years. It provides evidence of how the drug works and the most common side effects. This basically, conducting such a trial on more number of people basically gives an idea, because no single person, every person is different. You don't know how the body responds to any kind of infection. So just to see how the drug is responding, let's say 3,000 people. So that's how we know that, this drug is working this way in this person. And if this person has this underlying condition, okay, the drug is working in this way, and depending on how the mortality and the side effects, everything can be taken into account. Finally, during the phase 4, the drug is approved for use for continued monitoring. It is approved, but under continuous monitoring to make sure there are no other side effects that were not reported until the previous phase. And especially when these kind of things, we don't know how the long term this drug is going to respond in the long term, how body is going to respond. So it is approved, but long term monitoring is still continued to make sure that there are no serious side effects for the disease. So the next thing I would imagine would be searching for effective treatments for coronavirus. So drug development is sometimes described as a pipeline where the compounds moving from. Sometimes a drug that is being used for another disease is being repurposed for the use of a disease. For example, during swine flu, there was this drug that was repurposed. I forget the name. That was repurposed to use for the swine flu. Actually, I myself took that drug and it worked really well. The name is skipping off my head. Starts with the. So basically, it came coming up with an entirely new drug into the market. I think that can be really challenging. So if an existing drug can be repurposed to use, like the government started doing for hydrochloroquine, I'm going to come to that. I think that can be a quick alternative. Many compounds actually which start from scratch actually never make it that. So antivirals that have been developed so far are remdesivir. We know that it was created for Ebola in 2014. Then there is this Arbidol, which was tested along with the ritonavir as a treatment for COVID. Then there's another drug called Virologist, which is approved in some countries outside the United States to treat influenza. some reports from China have stated that it may work for the treatment of COVID. Again, every person is different, every area is different. We don't know how the drug responds. So maybe if this drug is working on this section of patients, it may not work in another section of population. So that's another challenge that we always have. Then there are other treatments like monoclonal antibodies, which trigger the immune system to attack the virus, and like antibodies, which are made by the body's immune system. That could be, but then for that, you have to have a healthy immune system, because if you have a suppressed immune system, the monoclonal antibody is actually going to target the immune system to kill it. So those kind of things have to be kept in mind. Second is the convalescent plasma. Along the same lines, the FDA has announced a process for medical facilities to conduct trials on experimental treatments that uses the blood plasma for people who are actually recovered from COVID-19. Again, these solutions are great, but they cannot be applied to a large section of the population as they're very expensive. Next is the immune modulators. In some people with COVID-19, the immune system goes into the overdrive using large amount of small proteins, inflammatory proteins, which are called cytokines. That could be another way. But again, these inflammatory molecules have to be accepted by the system. So that's another thing. Next is the stem cells. Next is the stem cells. A company called SISGIS began the phase 2 and 3 clinical trial to examine whether this could be a potential treatment. Then we know that hydroxychloroquine, which Donald Trump actually.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So further from the vaccine, I was talking about the vaccine. Our vaccine is basically what vaccine does is basically trains the immune system to recognize and attack the virus when it encounters it, and it protects the person, both the person who are vaccinated and the community. Viruses can't infect the people who are infected because the body has already been trained, which means that the vaccinated people cannot pass the virus, and this is known as the herd immunity. And there are multiple groups that are working on potential COVID-19 vaccine. I guess everyone's waiting for that now. And they are severely backed up by the non-profit Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. An official at the National Institute of Health that in mid-May, with a large-scale testing to begin in January, with the vaccine potentially available by January. Other experts say the more likely to use in the year 2021. Here are some of the projects. Some of the projects are like the Moderna and the University of Oxford in England, the University of Queensland in Australia. So these are basically my views as a healthcare research sector, and I sincerely hope that the vaccine will be available before this year in the public health during the crisis is addressed efficiently. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Megha, for giving us a very candid, in a way that laymen also can understand. Your talks have highlighted from the beginning of what is coronavirus, the novel one, the new. So the virus has been existing throughout the centuries from the evolution of mankind. But what today we find is a new one, which there is no vaccination for this. That's the difference today we have. And what the vaccination which is available will not work for it. And in the context, you also highlighted about the process of vaccination, the 4 stages of vaccination from the animal trial to the human trial. I believe that could be one of the important things where the audience could understand that it's not